Hello, and you're watching On the Table. We are broadcasting on RTM Click and MyTV's Berita RTM channel 123, which is also live streaming on YouTube. I'm your host, Brendan Paul. And welcome back. Escalating conflict involving Iran is rattling global markets, pushing oil prices higher and raising fears of wider regional instability. Now, with key shipping lanes at risk and major powers on the edge, the impact is being felt far beyond West Asia. So what does this mean for Malaysia's economy and diplomatic posture? Now, today, we break down the risks and the strategic stakes. With us in the studio, we have Dr. Muhammad Afzal Nizam Abdul Rashid, Chief Economist of Bank Muamalat Malaysia Berhad. Welcome to the show, Doctor.
Thanks, Brendan.
It's always a pleasure to have you here with us. And let's start our discussion about global oil and gas markets. Let's talk about these two items first. How are global oil and gas markets responding to this conflict that we have today? And what are the broader implications for energy prices? And let's also include inflation worldwide.
Sure. I think prior to the news flow on the military build-up within the Middle East oceans, you can see that the oil prices start to creep up. Mm-hmm. It used to be around $60, $65 per barrel for Brent, and suddenly it's creeping up towards $70 per barrel.
That's right.
And then when the war erupted on Saturday last week, and now it's hovering around $80 to $83 per barrel. Mm-hmm. So I think I must say that the spike in crude oil prices was quite significant, and of course that gives rise to the concerns over the durability of this conflict. Yeah.
Right. The lane, apparently it is one of the biggest port where oil is supposed to flow through, which is the Strait of Hormuz, and that's being blocked at the moment right now as we speak. But let's also talk about the impact of that. What does it bring to the country here in Malaysia? And obviously we have to talk about the global market as well. There is an immediate and medium-term risk. So what does the conflict pose to global supply chains? You know, particularly we're talking about energy and also shipping sectors.
Yeah, I guess your question is about how do we frame the issue? I mean, how do we define the problem statement? Yeah. Otherwise, we become scrambling, become panicking in terms of what are the right things to do to respond to such shocks. But obviously, as you said, this war, I mean, it entails disruptions in trade flows. In particular, the oil and gas industries. This is being reflected in the crude oil prices. But of course, beyond that, we have seen news flow on how it impacted the aviation industries. Yes. Our fellow Muslim who's doing their Umrah rituals got stranded there.
That's right.
So that's the immediate impact to the industries across the globe. But the thing that we are concerned now is how severe is this? Will it morph into a regional conflict? And of course, the main question is how long this conflict, this military attack will continue to occur. If that is the case, then obviously, as a policymakers, I suppose they will run down their scenario building, and which each scenario would actually correspond what would be the next course of action. That's on the policy side. But perhaps for businesses also, I think they also need to have that contingency plans, because we are still unsure how long the conflict will continue.
Yeah. That's the question. Even experts out there, they're trying to figure out, because President Donald Trump said this would only take a few weeks. But experts say, no, this can definitely prolong into weeks, months. Those are the duration that we don't want to happen. And when you spoke about strategy and contingency plan, that business sector and the oil and gas sector, they have to work together and come up with a contingency plan. Now, what kind of impact are we looking at? Not just price being hiked up, but it could carry other impact as well.
Well, I guess we need to look at what are the main channels, assuming this conflict will continue to prolong. Obviously, the main channel is through the oil prices because as we understand, for domestic consumptions, we import the fuel from abroad. So obviously that will give rise in terms of how these new prices, these elevated prices is going to affect the importations of this crude oil. And then it will be, the next question is how much the government will fork up in terms of the subsidies bill.
That's right.
So those are the main channel where it will impact our economy. But for now, what we have been hearing from the government is that at this current juncture, the government will still can afford to maintain the subsidies bill, and therefore we should expect the subsidized price for non-native will continue as it is.
In your own POVs, besides the oil and gas sector in Malaysia, is there any other economy that will be affected due to these tensions in West Asia?
True. I mean, we are a trading nation. If you look at our trade statistics, exports via sea accounted about 45% in 2025. Via air, it's about 40%. That's exports. Imports via sea is about 50%. Via air is about 37%. So that is how exposed we are in terms of the logistic disruptions. So if this war were to continue, obviously the exporters or importers will need to choose a different route, slightly longer, and that will entail more fuel consumptions, that will entail more insurance premium coverage.
That's right.
So that actually entails a higher cost of doing business.
And more demand for the fuel prices, of course, for business to continue moving forward. And now the fuel subsidy mechanism is in place, definitely, particularly for around 95. I mean, we Malaysians, we feel the impact of rising fuel prices from the crisis. What else can we do to help cushion this impact altogether?
All right. I think this news should be taken seriously across Malaysians, I mean across our society, meaning to say that we need to be in a state of ready to expect the worst case scenario. And of course, on a different note, perhaps it's high time for Malaysians to actually looking at electric vehicles, as a means to mitigate the impact. If you look at last year, EV registrations, it went up by more than 100%, 105% last year. So it was a big jump in terms of EV sales last year. That goes to show the acceptance level among our Malaysian citizens towards EV. So in that regards, therefore, from policy point of view, I think what is critical is to ensure that the infrastructure to support the EV industry is there. For now, I think if you look at the numbers in terms of the charging stations, the aspiration is to achieve 10,000 units. But as of last year, I think we are doing around 5,000 units. So there's more to go in terms of infrastructure. So on that note, I think the infrastructure front for EV needs to be scaled up so that more people will be using EVs. And perhaps when the time comes to rationalize the fuel subsidies again, at least we are, sort of mitigated in terms of the impact.
The impact wouldn't be that great as compared. Now, thank you so much, Doctor. We are going to go for a quick break, and when we come back, there's more to discuss right here on the table. So stick around, don't go anywhere. More with Doctor right here on the table. Stay tuned. Dr. Muhammad Afzal Nizam right here in the studio talking about the conflict that's ongoing in West Asia, and we are actually back with more discussion. Now, coming back to some of the questions that we have for you right now, Doctor. As you mentioned, that we are definitely an energy exporting nation. So let's talk about Malaysia. How does Malaysia benefit from higher oil prices?
Well, generally, it will benefit the oil and gas industries because higher oil prices mean higher revenues for them. And that seems narratives also for the Malaysian government. But for Malaysian government, I think if you look at the contribution oil-related revenues has actually dwindled over time.
Right.
For this year, based on the budget 2026, the ratio of petroleum-related revenues accounted about 12.5%. As opposed to in 2009, it was like 44%.
Right.
So in that regards, the government has actually diversified their revenue streams. So perhaps in terms of the revenue that they can get from oil and gas sector, perhaps it's not as much as before. But for the oil and gas industries, it can somehow help them to some degree. But in the grand scheme of things, if you look at the industry itself, has been undergoing this transformation, so to speak. Right after the oil price collapse in 2014,
right.
There's a structural change there. If you look at the number of oil rigs in operations, it was at the current juncture is still below than the 2014 level.
Okay.
So it goes to show that the oil and gas activities is not as much as before. And of course, because globally we are going towards more sustainable economy, where EVs is one of them, and going to green economy. So the consumptions of fossil fuel has actually dwindled.
Right.
So I think the industry itself is undergoing this transformation journey, so to speak. And now we are seeing this, maybe in terms of the contribution to revenues, probably it's just incremental.
Right. Now, you mentioned that's because there's a demand for EVs, green energy, so on and so forth. But can you actually agree that's also because of inflation and probably the rising import costs, and probably the list goes on?
In terms of the reaction, I think we need to understand the dynamics. One is to go into more sustainable economy, to reduce the carbon emission, blah blah blah. The other is how we can actually protect ourselves from any future shocks. As we know, crude oil, this fossil fuel industries is always prone to geopolitical risks.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's very fluid, especially after 2022, 2023. We can see a lot of geopolitical development then that can easily, spike up. The result in a spike up in terms of crude oil prices. So it's only right that for Malaysians to actually have a proper strategy. Beyond EV, of course, we talk about infrastructure such as train-based infrastructure, and of course, looking at labour market dynamics, we talk about things like flexible working arrangements.
Right.
That could actually change how people commute their day-to-day in terms of going to work. So all this requires how we can evaluate the things that we do in the past and taking into consideration the evolving factors that are going on right now.
Now that you have opened our eyes in terms of I would say helping our own selves curb the issue of rising prices, etc.
Right.
What do you say actually really makes sense, Doctor?
Well, I think subsidies is just patching lah.
Correct.
Price control also. But I think the big picture is what we want in terms of prices is that not to prices to come down.
Correct.
But more like prices are more flexible, meaning that there are times that will go up when the demand is high compared to supply. And there are times that prices will go down when the supply is more than the demand.
Right.
So this is the nature of prices that we should aspire for.
Right.
And at the moment, if you look at the price level, it's only going one way.
Yeah.
It's going up.
It's going up, yeah.
So it goes to show that there is inefficiencies in the economy. So to achieve that so-called efficiencies, that requires a lot of things in terms of the markets, structure. We talk about cartel. We talk about all these things that will distort the price. Things like subsidies also can contribute the distortion of market price. So all this requires a lot of massive reforms to the economy and also the institutions.
I think Malaysians, when we are exposed to oil price hike, etc., and the list goes on, because we have lots of things probably perhaps in the future will go up simply because to curb situations like this. How do we as Malaysians look at things that is not entirely bad simply because when there's a price hike, we are also, in a way, helping our very own economy to not be to not let a nation being taxed by its own individuals and therefore slumped at the end of the day, or probably even dwindle down by its GDP.
This is where I think we need to have a better understanding about the price.
Yeah.
What we want is not the price to go down,
Again,
but
yeah.
it can go up, but not too much. This is where the role of central bank come into the picture, where they will ensure that the inflation will rise, but not as much.
Right.
Yeah. In developed markets, they always target 2%. In our economy, we don't target any inflation regime, but what we want is stable inflation rates. So far, Bank Negara has done that. They managed to do that. If you look at last year, our inflation was 1.4%. Prior to that, in 2024, it was 1%. In 2023, it was 2.5%. You can see inflation is coming down. But that doesn't mean prices has gone down. No. Yeah. It's going up, but at a low speed. That's what the central bank is trying to achieve, actually. So the critical part about prices can go up is actually you can give more profits to the businesses. With profits, then they have more incentives to hire, to do capex and whatnot. But what we don't want price to increase excessively. So there will be a role of central banks, and on the fiscal side there will be a role of through regulations, through monitoring and whatnot.
Thank you so much for that explanation. It's another way to look at it, actually, in order for us to understand better when it comes to price hike, etc. Now, shifting gears just a little bit, you've mentioned at the very first or second question, cancelled flights or rescheduled flights. And of course, that has brought about different sorts of impact to us here Malaysians. What is the overall impact, actually, on Malaysia's economy when that happens?
I like to think like during COVID-19, everything stopped.
Everything grounded, yes.
Right. It was very extreme because, of course, we are fear about the health issues. I think this is somewhat similar to that because the war in Iran actually gave rise to concerns over the network of logistics. You did mention about the closure of Straits of Hormuz. So it has ripple effect, obviously. So the key issues, the underlying issue is about economic activities is being disrupted. So I think perhaps you are looking 20% of COVID kind of a situation in terms of the disruption. So that warrants a different kind of policy response. So we need to deep dive which category are most impacted, and the government will actually provide those the right assistance to those companies that are affected by this event.
Now, when you mentioned about strategies and any sorts of, I would say, key strategies in place in order for us to also cushion the impact altogether, but how can actually Malaysia use this opportunity to diversify its energy sources and also to enhance energy security in the face and wake of this?
This is where I think the renewable energy become more prominent, because that itself can help diversify the energy source, the energy mix. So far, I think it's still small. If you look at the Tenaga's energy mix, solar only account about 2%. But under an ETR, the aspiration is that renewable energy will reach around 70% by 2050. So it's still a long way to go. But this is the direction that we are going in terms of how we can switch the over-reliance on fossil fuel for our energy. And therefore, perhaps along the way, that can help us to mitigate the impact from this kind of geopolitical shocks.
Okay. Let's talk about how prepared are we in the sense of highlighting crucial sectors. We're talking also about manufacturing. We're not going to put them out of the picture, and probably even export industries for higher logistics and insurance costs. You mentioned about insurance costs, and that's actually a good take, actually. What's going to happen with regards to this conflict-related disruptions?
If you look at budget 2026, of course, last year we were concerned about the tariff shocks enacted by the US government. I still remember in budget 2026, one of the key measures to address the tariff shocks is the role of Exim Bank to give a soft loan to the affected companies. The total package about 500 million. So the key takeaway from that is actually to look at who are the stakeholders are being affected by those events. And therefore, the policy to mitigate the impact should cater for those stakeholders lah. Not go into one size fits all kind of solutions. As what we saw during COVID-19, we can say that the amount of stimulus was rather excessive. But again, the situation was rather different. I mean, COVID-19 is almost unprecedented, so people are unsure what to do. But perhaps that leads to that kind of a policy response lah.
Okay, last year, 2025 was a big year for Malaysia as we continue to move forward even to greater and bigger things. But last year we hosted ASEAN. So in your own context, or probably even your own opinion, how can this region help all the other existing regions? We're talking about 11 member state countries to help, I would say, to help one another out in that sense, and to help move forward together, especially being an ASEAN regional bloc.
I think it is highly critical for ASEAN country members to portray ourselves that we are a peaceful region. Because with peace, I think that will translate into trade and business and investments. And therefore, I think considering that the threats of tariff coming from the US, that warrants a coordinated efforts among the country members. I think we should have collaborated more in terms of how we should deal with President Trump. But so far, I think the stance is actually very, individualistic, very, country individuals in terms of how this negotiation can happen. But I think those styles has to change lah. You need to collaborate, and you should have a unified voice when it comes to dealing with the US.
Okay, and you just mentioned about all these stunts that should have been done earlier, or probably even perhaps, move forward with the ASEAN countries. In your own POVs, probably perhaps, what kind of plan you would love to see happening?
I guess because the ASEAN itself, it has some structural issues. I mean, it was formed not because of economics, but because of the geopolitics.
The strength of,
so I think we are evolving. I think that will require some time for us to see a better result.
Okay, all right. Now, let's talk about this prolonged instability, especially right here in West Asia, influenced by global investment flows and financial market as well. At the end of the day, how might this prolonged instability affect this whole role altogether? And could this create risks or opportunities for emerging economies, especially right here in Malaysia, especially when we are actually taking the opportunity to grab something that they can actually move forward because of this conflict altogether?
My greater concern is actually the fuel price. I mean, in relation to the government subsidies. Because if you look at the composition of the inflation rate, the consumer price index, petroleum account about 5.5%. That's quite sizable. So I think the government needs to convey the message to the public that the government is watching this situation and will react accordingly. But at the same time, we need to prepare our society that if there is a need to adjust the fuel prices, then we need to be prepared for that. I think last year, the use of My Card as a means to dish out this subsidy assistance, I think is brilliant. It goes to show that targeted subsidies can be done. So given that this possible prolong in terms of the impact, so I think the government needs to prepare our society in terms of the possible eventualities arising from this problem.
Okay, Doctor, before we go, probably perhaps if you would like to share any sorts of advice to our viewers watching at home who are actually quite concerned about this whole conflict that's ongoing with regards to their family members being stranded, so on and so forth, or probably perhaps there are business owners out there who are worried about the situation that's actually happening at West Asia, what would you tell them?
Okay, I think the most critical thing is information.
Okay.
We need to get the right information, no fake news, because that can lead to unnecessary panic. Because people will start talking about, excessive increase in fuel price and whatnot.
That's right.
So get the right information and talk to the right people so that they can make an informed decisions.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for being on the show.
Most welcome.
And that concludes this episode of On the Table. Now, we have been speaking with Dr. Muhammad Afzal Nizam Abdul Rashid, who is the Chief Economist of Bank Muamalat Malaysia Berhad. Now, we appreciate all the insight that Doctor just shared with us, and of course, looking forward as well to having Doctor back again on the show. Thank you so much once again, Doctor, for being here. Now, a repeat of this episode is available on Berita RTM YouTube channel, so be sure to go and check that out as well. Till then, I'm Brendan Lepal. Thank you for watching and take care.